just got my MBA in money and math and Excel spreadsheets and yeah, numbers. I know how to spell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hallelujah. So we're going to first go through Shemot or Exodus chapter 10, because what I want to do is take us through really what Shavuot is, the purpose, the point, and ultimately we want to figure out, so what is it that we're supposed to get out of this set apart time? Why is it that Yahweh commands this time to be kept? It's not for his own good. Let me get that out the way. It is not so that he can remember something, but it's so we can remember something. He's put it in place for us. And so we're going to talk through, first we're going to read the chapter, and then we're going to go back through it, and then we've got some other things we're going to go through. All right, so turn with me to Exodus, Shemot, chapter 19. We're going to start at verse 1, and we're going to read the entirety of the chapter. Verse 1, in the third new moon, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, or Egypt, on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they set out from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. And Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, this is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, or Jacob, and declare to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Mitzrites, or the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you out to myself. And now, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. Verse 6, and you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel. And Moshe, or Moses, came and called to the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahweh commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do. So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, see, I am coming to you in the thick cloud, so that the people hear when I speak with you, and believe you forever. And Moshe reported the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, go to the people and set them apart today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their garments, and shall be prepared by the third day. For on the third day Yahweh shall come down upon Mount Sinai before the eyes of all the people, and you shall make a border for the people all around, saying, take heed to yourselves, that you do not go up to the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall certainly be put to death. Not a hand is to touch it, but he shall certainly be stoned or shot with an arrow, whether man or beast. He shall not live. When the Yobelah, or the Yobel, sounds long, let them come near the mountain. And Moshe came down from the mountain to the people and set the people apart. And they washed their garments And he said to the people, be prepared by the third day. Do not come near a wife. Verse 16, and it came to be on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud on the mountain, and a voice of a shofar was heard, was very strong. And all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet with Elohim. And they stood at the foot of the mountain, and Mount Sinai was in smoke, all of it, because Yahweh descended upon it in fire. Yahweh descended upon it in fire. And its smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and all the mountain trembled exceedingly. And when a voice of the shofar sounded long and became very strong, Moshe spoke, and Elohim answered him by voice. He answered him by voice. And Yahweh came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. And Yahweh called Moshe to the top of the mountain. And Moshe went up. And Yahweh said to Moshe, go down and warn the people, lest they break through unto Yahweh to see, and many of them fall. And let the priests who come near Yahweh set themselves apart too, lest Yahweh break out against them. And Moshe said to Yahweh, the people are not able to come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, make a border around the mountain and set it apart. And Yahweh said to him, come, go down, and then come up, you and Aaron or Aaron with you. But do not let the priest and the people break through to come up to Yahweh, lest he break out against them. And Moshe went down to the people and spoke to them. Okay, so let's go back up and kind of go through this a little bit, and then we've got someplace else that we're going to go. So what we see happening here is the children of Israel have done what? They have left Mitzrayim or Egypt, right? So they're gone. When is this? This is in the third new moon. The third new moon. So we know that the new moons are marked by, the months are marked by the new moons. When that sliver of moon is visible, then it is now representing a new 30-ish days that comes into play until when? The next new moon. And so just as we would say January, February, March, April, May, June, they would just simply have month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, so on and so forth. Okay? And so the first new moon, what happened? We're in Exodus 19. What happened in the first new moon? What took place on the 14th day of the first new moon? They kept the Passover, right? Where were they when they kept the Passover? In Egypt, in bondage, that place of bondage. This was the first new moon. Halfway through it, it's very simple. When the slither of the moon is visible, day 1 of the first new moon. What's the second day? Day 2. What's the third day? Trick question. No, it ain't. Day 4, day 5, so on and so forth. When do we stop counting? When do we start counting over again? Let me say that. When you see another slither. Right. You see another slither, that's what? 1. But now you're at month 2, day 1, month 2, day 3, so on and so forth. So they came out of Mitzrayim, and I'm not going to open up this midrash. So they came out of Mitzrayim somewhere between the 14th, 15th, 16th. We just going to cover all of that, okay? because that's not the discussion for right now. And so, if that be the case, whether it's the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, it's the middle of the month, right? It has 3 or 4 days that's dead in the middle of the new moon. Okay. All right, what else do we know? Well, in verse 5 and 6, there's something very, very interesting that's spoken by Yahweh. Yahweh is addressing Moshe. He's addressing Moses about how to address the people. Okay? He's addressing Moshe on how to address the people. And what does he say? He says, let them know that if they diligently obey my voice, when you say if, for all the parents in here, when you say to your child, if you clean up your room, that's a contingency, right? What if they don't? They ain't getting what's coming after that if, right? If you clean up the room, we'll go to Cold Stone and get some ice cream. Right? So, if you diligently, verse 5, if you diligently obey my voice, and what? Guard my covenant. Guard my covenant. Guard, stand guard. That word shamar is a very strong and intentional word that's used to say guard. Guard my covenant. Then, this is an if-then statement. So, if you clean up your room, then we go to Cold Stone. If you don't, then we won't. That's really like, it just comes without saying. But what usually comes with that if, then? It's usually a blessing or what? A curse. It's a blessing or a curse. And very often, he doesn't even mention one of the two. Sometimes he mentions the curse, sometimes he doesn't. Thank you. And sometimes he just lets you read into it. Well, here you go right here. It says, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be who? My treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. He said two things right there. One, by saying above all the peoples, he's like, but wait a minute now, everybody, everything, all of it's mine. But you will be treasured, a treasured possession. I'm putting you above. For all, but all the earth is mine. But now let's continue the thought in verse 6. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel. He made an offer to them to say, hey, guys, if you do this, then I'll do this. But now, when your child looks at you, and I'm saying a child who actually likes Cold Stone ice cream. I'm not saying somebody who don't like it, because then they'll be like, I don't care. I still ain't going to clean my room. But what does that kid usually do? Get a little excited, right? And they're like, ooh, 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 ooh. What's the next thing they do? They start agreeing. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm going to go clean my room. I'm going to go clean it. I'm going to go clean it. So what does Yahweh say once he goes? He says, hey, I'm making this covenant available to you. What does verse 8 say? And all the people answered together and said what? All that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do. That's that agreement. Oh, yeah. Oh, I can be a treasured possession. I can be placed above all the people of the earth. I can be a priest unto the Most High and be a set-apart people. Oh, we taking that deal. All that he says, we will do. They was excited right there, right? They accepted the offer. But there was something that had to go with it, remember? Something needed to go with it. And so he says that you are to guard my covenant. You are to diligently obey me. These are things that when you do them, you get the blessing. You get the promise that has been made to you. Then we see In verse 10, he says, you're unclean. So the first thing I need you to do is go wash. Wash your garments and prepare yourselves. He even goes as far as to say not that a husband is not even to come near to touch his wife. Because he says during this time of cleansing, I want complete and total cleansing. For 3 days, they are to cleanse themselves. Now in verse 12, he also comes and says, also, I am preparing a place by which I can actually make this happen. And that was Mount Sinai. So he says, I don't even want you to touch the mountain. Don't even touch the mountain. And so he had Moshe and the elders to make a border, because Moshe and the priests could go on the mountain. They were actually on the mountain. But the people, he said, build a border around it. Build a border around it. Build a border. And then we see in verse 13 that he would allow now a sign for the people to easily recognize that Yahweh is speaking and dealing with his people. And he says that when the Yobel sounds long, let them come near. Don't touch, but come near. So now, what is he doing? He's getting their attention. He's getting their attention, right? And so when we get here, I want you to put a finger, a star, or a mental note or something at verse 18 and 19. Whole verse 18 and 19, okay? All right, so now, what is it that happened in Shemot chapter 20? Because we were just reading, we just read all of 19, right? What happened in Exodus chapter 20? I hear from my youth, I heard an answer. What was it? The 10 words. He gave to Israel the commandments. That's chapter 20. Chapter 20, Exodus chapter 20. We read. It's a snippet. We've kind of gotten each one shortened. But this is what we read every Shabbat. This is Exodus chapter 20. I am Yahweh your Elohim. You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image. Do not bring the name of Yahweh your Elohim to naught. Remember the Sabbath. He is explaining to them what? He told them to do what? Diligently obey. Okay, so if I tell you to diligently obey, what should be the next question? Obey what? So is it safe to say that this is the what? The obey what is now coming, because he said, when they hear the Yobel, tell them to come near to the mountain and listen. And now when he begins to speak, what is he speaking? Exodus chapter 20. The commands. Exodus chapter 20. So I want to first take this from things that we can relate to hands-on. My wife has diligently been putting out every day the counting of the Omer, as we have come to now, this being the 50th day. And so I wanted to use some of this as a way for us to further solidify and know and understand what we're doing. So, does anybody remember what happened on March 14th, 2021? It was my birthday. Thank you. Thank you very much. I turned, how old did I turn? 21. I turned 41 years old on March the 14th, Or you could say I turned 30 for the 11th time. It's my 11th anniversary of my 30th birthday. So, I had to say 30 because Elise wasn't born until I was 30, so I had to include that. She had to be in there. Actually, you wasn't born in July. I guess I got to say 31s. Okay. Yeah, no, you wasn't born until July. So, when I turned 30, you weren't born yet. But anyway, what else happened on March the 14th, 2021? The new year. That was the first day of the new moon. So if y'all remember that post, Rosie posted that. Y'all remember that? Abib, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. That's found in Exodus 12 and 2. Y'all remember seeing that post? All right. Happy New Year. All right. So what happened on April the 4th, 2021? That was the first day of the counting of the Omer. So now let's put these in order. You have March the 14th, the first new moon began, right? You have April the 4th, the counting started. Now, what does that mean? That means that you are several days into that new moon, because from March 14th to April 4th is like 2.5 weeks, you know? And so you're not quite all the way through. You're not through a month, but you're about halfway through a month. And so what happened a few days before would have been what? Passover. Passover would have been a few days before. And so if we looked at it, we would have known that somewhere around April 13th would have started the second new moon. April 13th would have started the second new moon. Now, May 12th, 13th, somewhere in there would have started the third new moon. Somebody remind me of what we read in Exodus 19, chapter 19, verse 1. Somebody read the first few words of that for me. In the third new moon. So, this hopefully is lining up, right? It doesn't tell us the exact day. But what it tells us is that we're in the third new moon. Now, again, going from today is what? May according to the Gregorian calendar, May the 23rd. And we had a new moon on May the 12th or so, 13th, 12th or 13th. I don't remember which day it was. I can see the percentage, but I can't remember which exact day it was. But what does that mean? We're now in the what? Third new moon. We're in the third new moon. So, if Yahweh was going to do something as big as to go into covenant with his people at Mount Sinai, bringing them to the mountain, giving them an exact time by telling them it's not even time yet. Wait 3 days. We got 3 days to go until something. What might that something had been? What might that something have been? Could it have been Shavuot? So could it be that Yahweh went into covenant with his people on Shavuot? That Exodus 20 happened on Shavuot. Now, remember I said keep a thumb in verse 18 and 19? Now, really quick, by way of a pause, pause for the cause. So somebody read verse 18 and 19. Okay. So Yahweh answered him by voice. Yahweh answered him by voice. And we just read, I've got it on the recording. You won't be able to hear that part. But what we just read is that Moshe and the children of Israel witnessed the mountain of Yah, and it was covered with smoke. And it was like a furnace. Yahweh's presence settled on the top of it. And it also told us that there was the voice of a shofar that sounded long and very strong. Very strong. Very strong. So now let's go by way of a little bit of a detour. Not a big detour, but just to get us some extra enlightenment. Go to Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. And if we start at verse 1, it says, "And when the day of the festival of Shavuot," or people would recognize it as when the day of Pentecost had come, they were all with one mind in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from the heaven. Does that sound familiar? Exodus chapter 19, verse 18 and 19. Does that sound familiar? As a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and it settled on each one of them. Does that sound familiar? Did it speak of anything dealing with fire in Exodus chapter 19, verse 18 and 19? That we recognize that maybe that wasn't the first time. Was Shavuot the first time that they were introduced to the voice of the Most High? Do we really understand what it means when it says and speaks of the mighty rushing wind being the Ruach, the Spirit? When it speaks of the tongues of fire, do we simply think about what is spoken? Because it's describing, it's if you just look at the senses that it's describing, it uses very specific senses. One sense that it uses is what? This was visual. It wasn't speaking of what was heard. It spoke of the loud sound, right? And then in the next verse, it spoke of something not being heard, but something being seen. What did they see when they're at Mount Sinai? Fire appeared to them as tongues or flames. Just take the tongues out, because it's not speaking of a language. It's speaking of tongues of fire. Just like when we like to, we had tabernacles, we like to roast the marshmallows. The best places to get it right there at the right when the tongues of fire kind of kicking up and sticking right on it, You don't want to get it way down where it's just ridiculously hot, right? Because it just burns up. But if you put it up there with the tongues of fire just kind of jumping out at it, you can get it nice and roasted, and you pull it out, and it's got the little fire on it still, and you blow it out, slide it off. Y'all, we done did that a time or two, right? You make your little chamois. But you're using those tongues of fire. You're not really speaking to the fire. The fire isn't speaking to you, which is why it didn't use an audio description. It used a visual description. It had already dealt with the audio description when it spoke of the mighty rushing wind. It said the sound was as a mighty rushing wind, but it appeared as flames of fire. Reminiscent. Reminiscent of what? Of what they had heard about and read about in Exodus. Did they have Exodus? Of course. They knew the Torah backwards and forwards. We the ones that struggle with it. They didn't have to talk about books and chapters and verses. They didn't have that. They just rattle off a little piece and you know exactly where they at. Because that scroll was continuous. It didn't stop. So they didn't say turn to chapter 1, verse 5, the B section. It wasn't none of that. Oh, you read the whole book. So we see there that this was very similar. Very similar. This wasn't the first thing. It wasn't the first time. Yahweh's not doing something brand new, as Rabbi says. We'd like to understand what he means when he says new. He's meaning renewed. I'm taking you back. Vayikra, or Leviticus, chapter 25. We're going to read verses 8 through 10. Leviticus chapter 25. We're going to read verses 8 through 10. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. Easy math. 7 times 7 is 49. And you shall then sound a shofar sound on the 10th day of the 7th new moon, on Yom HaBikarim, and that, Yom HaKippurim. That is Yom Kippur, or Day of Atonement. So on that day, cause a shofar to sound through all your land. And you shall set the 50th year, because that's the year to come. Remember that Yom Kippur comes in which month? The 7th month. You're well into that 7. When it says 7th year, 7 times 7, you're well into that 7th, that 49th year. You're at the doorstep, halfway through the year. And so what is he saying? Set the 50th year apart and proclaim release throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It is a Yobel, or a jubilee, for you. And each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you return to his clan. Each of you return to his possession, and each of you return to his clan. Do you see a similarity? Do we see a similarity there? Verse 8 says that you are to count 7 Sabbaths of years. What do we do at the time of Shavuot? We count 7 Sabbaths. So this is kind of like a microcosm of what? Jubilee. It's the same thing. One is based on days, one is based on years. And now, what does it say happens in the 7th times 7th year, the 49th year? There's the blowing of the Yobel. Do we recognize that? That same thing happened when? At the time of Shavuot. That same Yobel blast we read back in Exodus chapter 19. That same thing happened. This time it represents something beautiful. What did it represent? Well, the last part we read, it said what? And each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you return to his clan. Now, if we go down a little bit and look at verse 28, it says, and if his hand has not found enough to give back to him, pause. So whatever was yours, you get back. But do you get it for nothing? there has to be paid what? A redemption price. A redemption price. 28 says, though, what if you ain't got it? Y'all ever heard somebody say that? You let them hold something, you ask for it back, and they be like, I ain't got it right now. And in your mind, you're thinking, well, when you going to have it? And you probably say that too. So that's how it is with us. We're in this covenant with Yahweh where he has given us an advance. And we go squander our stuff away dealing with all of these other gods and other stuff, right? All right. So now what's next? And if his hand has not found enough to give back to him, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until when? The year of release. And it shall be released in the Yobel, and he shall return to his possession. And so what the concept that this brings in, and you have to read again this, you have to read this whole chapter, is the concept of release. And this release very often ties directly into another concept with the redemption. When something is redeemed, you give something to receive something that's owed back to you. And so this could be, you redeem a coupon. You give that little piece of paper to the cashier, and they take off 10 cents from your groceries. That's about what it be too. You're like, man, really? 10 cents? So this redemption, but what if you can't afford it? What have you become? Poor. Which means you got to wait until this release time, this time of reset happens. When this time of reset happens, there's one kinsman redeemer who has paid this price. And this kinsman redeemer pays that price, allowing what to happen? All things to be returned back. Hallelujah. So we, have become poor, maybe we can't afford it. I ain't got it right now. But we have a redeemer who has made it available. But y'all ever been someplace and you had a good coupon? It was like a buy one, get one free. And you had your two, and then you went looking for the coupon, like, oh, man. And you get to the register, they ring up both of them. You're like, but I can buy one, get one free. You're like, where your coupon at? If it's been made available, but you don't have the capacity or the desire to use it, do you take advantage of its benefits? No. Go back to what the covenant was from the beginning. What's the first thing we read in Exodus chapter 19? It said, if you diligently obey. Verse 5. You can take advantage of this, but you must diligently obey. Without the diligent obedience and the guarding of the covenant, then it's a coupon with no value. You have chosen not to use it. Its redemption value does no good to you unless you use it. A little accounting insight. Companies put aside a certain amount of money, cutting their sales, to say this is for rebates. Anybody who redeems these, during this date, y'all wonder why they always put dates on them? It's because at the end of that date, they can account for it. And they can say, no longer can anybody redeem this. So guess what they do? Put it right back up. So the money that they took down to make sure that just in case you use that coupon, that they've already accounted for it. This is a just in case entry. And as soon as that date rolls around, accounting adjusts it. rebate over, which means now you cannot use it. It is no longer accounted for. They now put their balance sheet back on where it was, and if they had $1 billion set apart to be used for these coupons and only $500 million was used, y'all think they're going to mail us a few dollars just to make sure, hey, you didn't take advantage. Here's your $2. Hey, you didn't take advantage. Here's your $3.50. Nope. They keep them $500 million on the books. And so if we leave the redemptive blood, where is that? And don't apply it to our hearts, to our minds, to our actions, to our deeds, to our will, then what good does that redemptive blood do? None for you. None for you. Hallelujah. So I'm going to try to do this quickly. And I apologize for anybody who's seeing this for the first time because there's a lot more that goes with it, and I'm not going to go through everything. But I will at some point in the future. And so, but for most of you, you've seen this teaching where we line up the days of creation with the holy days. These are the days of creation, okay? First day, light divided darkness, light from darkness. Second day, separated waters from waters. The expanse that we reside in was created. Third day was dry land and vegetation. So he parted the waters to create dry land, and from that dry land came forth vegetation. On the fourth day, the stars, the sun, the moon was created for guidance, to guide seasons and times. Day 5, fish and bird created, birds. Day 6, man and beast, and the creeping creatures and all the livestock was created. And the seventh day he rested. The Sabbath was created. Now, if we look at the 7 holy days just kind of lined up, and I'm using the seventh as the Sabbath, representing the different both forms of the Sabbath, not just, the Sabbath is kind of overarching in everything. So I'm not saying that Sukkot is not. I'm counting the seventh feast as the Sukkot because it's in the 7th month, lasts for 7 days, same sevens. And so all of it's in this sevens kind of setup. Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Shavuot or Pentecost, right in the dead middle. Right in the dead middle. Now, what was created on that last day? The 4th day, sorry. Sun, moon, stars. When I think of all you made, the sun and the moon and the stars, no praise is high enough to express how great you are. Hallelujah. Stars, the sun, the moon was created on this 4th day. On this 4th day, lining up with this 4th feast. They're both dead in the middle, pegged right in the middle, dead in the middle. If you look at the menorah, there's 3 on one side, 3 on the other side. If you need an example, look at the counting of the Omar. We have it back there. You have that one in the middle. It's the 4th. That's called the Shamash. That's where the branches, those other 3 are called branches. They get their light, their oil, their supply from the Shamash, which is also called, Shamash means servant. That servant candle, because it pours oil to the others. It allows that oil to be pulled from it. The oil is pulled from. The way it's designed, air is flowing, and it's flowing right up so that that flame can continue to burn. The only way it continues to burn is if that 4th Shamash, that 4th stick, which is the base of it, has oil. So let's look at this word. Just look at the word Shavuot. Dead middle, right? Right in the middle of the feast season. And when I looked at this, I was like, wow, I don't know why I've never looked at it this way before. But it's made up of, there's a couple of different spellings for it. And this actually is week. Shavuot makes it into weeks, Feast of Weeks. But this is Shavuot, which is what you will find if you go into the Hebrew in Exodus 19, where it says Feast of Weeks, Shavuot. And it's spelled Shin, Beit, Ayin, Hey. Shin, Beit, Ayin, Hey. 4 letters. If you look at these 4 letters and how they are lined up, you start with the Shin, which is the protection. Yahweh protecting his people. Shaddai. Yahweh protects his people. So the paleo sign is a sign of teeth. So him guarding and protecting his people is the first one. So whenever you see Shin starting a word, it's a strong word. It's a strong word. So when we say, Shabbat Shalom, both starting with Shin, when he says for us to shamar the Shabbat or guard the Shabbat, strong word, speaking of you being upfront and forceful in a form of protection. So the Shin is a protective word. It's solid. Even this word, and I didn't go into that, and I won't touch, I'll only touch on it. But this word gets into how they would go into covenant even. Calling one being sevened or Shavuot. So you go into a covenant, what would they do? They would do things in sevens. They would cut 7 animals, or they would commit to each other 7 times, or whatever it is, they would repeat something 7 times. Whatever they were doing, they call that sevening. So it's when I say something 7 times, I am going into covenant saying, this is a promise. I'm protecting and standing by this. And so the Shin is then followed by the Beit. The Shin is then followed by the Beit. And so the protection of Yahweh, protecting the house, and then right in the 3rd letter there, Ayin, is us. It's our ability to see. We have to see and perceive with our eyes. Y'all remember I've been talking about that word da'at, for knowledge, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and how they walked in, and remember, as the door, the dalet followed by the ayin, and that ayin allowed them to see and perceive what was in. And what was that? The sign. Remember, the at, the sign, the tav. And they had to now choose whether it was good or evil. And we're confused, right? We get real confused because sometimes what's good looks evil, and sometimes what's evil looks good, and we get messed up, which is why we say the wrong things, do the wrong things, eat the wrong things, celebrate the wrong things, go to wrong places. All of these things, there are very few people who make bad choices on purpose. Most people don't desire to make bad choices, right? Would y'all agree with that? Most people are desiring to make a good choice, but don't always. Why? Because we're confused by the choices that we're given. The evil and the good are now both represented up here. So this knowledge is confusing. But going back to this Shavuot, going back to this Shavuah, Shin, Beit, protection of Yahweh, the house, allowing us to see allowing us to see what? The spirit of Yah, the breath of Yah. When he breathed the breath of life, that hay represents the breath, represents the breath. And so when you're speaking of the breath of Yah, we're speaking of him doing what? Bringing forth life. What did he say to the prophet Ezekiel? Ezekiel asked him and said, Yahweh asked Ezekiel, can these bones live? I remember that. He asked him, can these bones live? What was Ezekiel's response? He says, you know. And then what did Yahweh instruct him to do? Speak life. He spoke to him, and Yahweh did what? Breathed the breath of life into those dead bones, and they became a living army. And so this Shavuot, remember, the Torah is what was given, right? On Shavuot. So what did they do at that time? They went into covenant, right? Y'all remember that? All that he says, he offered. He says, hey, if y'all obey, and if you keep my covenant, guard my covenant, you'll be my treasured possession. Above all the peoples, you will be mine. You will belong to me. Does that sound like a sevening? Does that sound like a covenant? Does that sound like a binding? He did what to get to that point? Count for yourself what? 7 Sabbaths. And each one of those weeks has how many days? 7 days. He's sevening. He's causing a sevening to happen, causing his people to go into covenant with him. He uses the same concept to say, just in case you get away from that covenant, I can redeem you back to myself at the time of the Yobel, at the time of the Jubilee, because after 7 years of sevens, 49 years, guess what I'm going to do? Allow you to return back to your possession. Who do we belong to? So he's bringing his possession back to himself. Back to himself. And it's only by his spirit that we're able to see that. See, we remain carnal until it involves, one, we're starting out with his protection. His protection, not ours, not, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And, well, my tradition does this. And, well, my church does that. Well, we celebrate this. This Shavuot begins with the protection of the Most High, allowing you to enter into his house. And now you can perceive. You can now see. Once you're in the house, you can now see. But the only way we'll see is what? By his spirit. Not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, saith Yahweh. And so when he says that, it doesn't just stop right there. Too many people was thinking that, the Holy Spirit ain't come into place until Acts. But we just showed that Acts had already happened way back. And so let's ask this question. I have a question. What are the results of this appointed time? What do we get out of this? What are the results? And so it should be that we are solidifying what? A covenant. Because we have to remind ourselves, Yahweh has this in here so we remember, oh yeah. All that you said, we will do. And I didn't even go into this part, but y'all, they covered us. Because what they said is, this is for those who are here today and those who are not. So they included us in there so that we can't say, well, no, that was another generation. All that he said we will do, and we will speak for our children. So I speak for my son, I speak for my daughter. All that Yah says, they will do. And as long as they're under my household, they will do it forcibly. But I'm teaching them so that when they make their own decisions, their answer is still what? Yes. All that you said, we will do. The other thing that it does solidifies this covenant, but what do we read that was Leviticus chapter 25? What do we read there? Do we sometimes become poor? Do we sometimes lose our way? Do we sometimes get off track? Do we sometimes get kicked out of promised lands? Do we sometimes end up in places of captivity? Do we sometimes be under the thumb of the man? So we can find ourselves becoming poor. But what else does Shavuot do? It also represents a Yobel. It also represents, in that 50, he says, I already know that you're going to break this covenant. Because before Moshe even died, he told them about themselves. He says, y'all going to do all of this. Told them. Did it stop them? No. Generations past. What do we read when we read in Judges and Kings? What does it say? Continuously. And he did the evil of his fathers. And he led the people away from the Most High. And he did again build the high places of the people of the land. Over and over and over. So he knew that we would become poor. So what did he do? What also does this time represent? What also are the results of this time? A redemption. Because that fourth did what? That fourth day was what? Light. What did that light allow? What do you do when you get home? Some of y'all might have some automatic timers. I don't have automatic timers. We got to hit the switch. You get home and you can see. Now, how many of you know your houses? Everybody, right? I mean, is anybody in here just moved in a house like yesterday and don't know it? You might be a little confused. But for the most part, everybody knows your house, right? Why cut on the light? Because you still need to see. Even when you think you know something, you still need to see. So what does the Torah that was given on Shavuot do? Because the covenant was so that we could be in relationship with the Most High. The contingency was for us to obey something. The something came in Exodus chapter 20. The commands. Because when you do this, you can stay in covenant with me. You're in my good graces. In other words, child, as long as you obey the rules of the house, we're good. You ain't got to pay no rent. You don't have to chip in on food. I am talking about, I mean, once you might have different rules when they get a little older. I mean, they might, but I mean, it's like, yeah, rent due on the 1st, yeah, food bill due on the 15th, But we don't mind, at least most parents don't, you don't mind supporting your children. You know that you're supposed to. It's an obligation. But when that child begins to say, all that you say, I don't care, it's Whole nother issue. All of y'all just had flashbacks. I mean, good gracious. Everybody's like, ooh, if he ever. Some of y'all kids going to get a whooping just to make sure that don't happen. Like, they're going to be like, remember what Rabbi 2 said? You better not ever think. You're like, but I didn't. Just in case you was thinking it. So it solidifies that covenant, but it also redeems you back to that covenant. And he leaves. Who was that? I can't even remember what the company was, but their thing was, we'll leave the light on for you. Motel 6, yeah. And so Yahweh leaves that light on for us. Yahweh leaves that light on, the light of Torah, given it in the fourth feast, same day that the lights in the heavens were created for what? So that we can understand times, seasons, know when you are, know where you are. Y'all know how to, ain't no traffic signs out on the ocean. How do they know where they are? The light. The light. That's how we have to see it. We have to remember. It's like us being in the ocean. The Revelation says that, the peoples are the ocean. The ocean's seas. The seas are the peoples. And so let's look at it like that. We are on the seas. And there's no road maps. There's no Siri. There's no Google Maps. The only thing we have is the light that Yahweh left on for us. And that light is the light of the Torah. And so that Shavuot binds us, and when we find ourselves away, it allows us to come back. The light of the Torah allows us that opportunity to be in covenant with him and to be redeemed. Amen.